Well, to start with, I am not hugely experienced with any psychedelic or hallucinogenic. My past has only been with a moderately large dose of 2CE. I've tried 2CB a few times too, where I tripped for about 9 hours, which I found quite enjoyable. I knew where I was, and it came onto me somewhat gradually, starting with mild closed-eye visuals and moving on to things such as full-blown open-eye visuals. The main thing about 2CE was that I still understood my surroundings, and it was just things like posters coming alive and so on. Anyways, onto my experience with Salvia. I and some friends got 1/3 of a gram of Salvia 60x extract. I did some reading and read that 1 gram of 60x Salvia contains 150 milligrams of salvinorum-a, which is the specific part of salvia that makes you trip. 1 milligram is said to give a moderately strong trip. 3 milligrams is said to give an uncomfortably strong trip. I ended up packing about 175 milligrams of the salvia extract into a bong, which at the time I didn't figure was 30 milligrams of salvinorum-a. Roughly 10x, an uncomfortably strong dose. I used a jet flame lighter, as I've heard that salvia must be burnt at a very high temperature, and not with an ordinary lighter in order to get the full effects. I took one big bong rip and lay down on my friend's bed getting ready to relax. I breathed out the smoke after about 15 or 20 seconds, and then, before I knew anything, I was tripping. I lost all sense of time. At first, I think I just closed my eyes, and then I was immediately in the trip. I didn't know where I was, who I was, or what I was even. All of my senses were going wild. I couldn't see clearly or understand anything around me, and neither could I speak. I sort of figured I was on the bed, and after about 5 minutes I was cognizant and realized I was tripping. I felt like I had to get off of the bed, but I kept leaning forward and falling back, trying to steady myself with my arms. Every time I managed to sit up, it felt like the mattress folded back over on itself and pushed me back. Everything was brightly coloured and crazy. I had no idea who I was or what was going on. All I had to do was get off of this bed. The best way I could describe this part of the trip was everything was repeating itself. Imagine you're trying to open a door. You open it and end up on the same side of the door closed where you started, like lagging in a Minecraft server. I was stuck in a loop, but it wasn't even me stuck in a loop. I didn't even know I had a body. I tried to explain to my friends that I was tripping much harder than I ever expected while trying to sit up, but I just couldn't talk. I had lost all of my vocabulary and felt like my tongue was gone or something was wrong with my mouth. I kept trying to put my hands in my mouth to check if my tongue was still there. It felt as if my tongue had fallen down my throat and was just limp. I apparently didn't say anything comprehensible to my friends and spoke like someone with their tongue stuck out muttering random words. It was horrible. I kept trying to move from the bed and lost sense of dimensions and which way was up and down. The whole time I was having ridiculous open-eye visuals. Everything was blurry, and I couldn't make out sounds or shapes either. I crawled across to the end of the bed and managed to stand up and get off of it. When I put my foot on the ground, it felt like I had just put my foot on a wall, or I was on the top of a cube and walked to the edge, put my foot on the next side of the cube. And as I did that, the cube rolled onto another side, so I was standing up sideways. By now, my friends thought I was done tripping, as we figured it would only last 5 minutes, but they were completely wrong. I still couldn't speak and was getting seriously irritated and flustered. I tried to take my pants off as I was getting incredibly hot, and it felt like I undid the button on my pants hundreds of times while walking to a chair to sit down. My friends told me I only did that once. By now I wanted the trip to end. I was freaking out and worried about what was going on. Things weren't wearing off, and I felt hugely impaired physically and mentally. My brain could only come up with a couple of words, and could barely even say 2 of them to my friends. I wanted to put my tongue back into my mouth so I could tell them I wasn't done tripping, and I just needed to sleep. I managed to get a few words out, but I was getting very irritated, because my friends kept pulling my hand from my mouth and touching me, when all I wanted to do was put my tongue back and explain to them I needed to relax. I was getting more and more frustrated, not being able to speak. I ran to another room to just lie down in bed and managed to scream out really loudly, "Fuck off, just fuck off, leave me alone." I was coming off really aggressive as I just wanted this to end. I needed to lie down and rest till morning. I managed to get into bed, but it was impossible to get comfy. All of my skin was incredibly sensitive, and I had banged my feet all over walls and things on the floor when I was running around earlier, trying to get away from my friends to put my tongue back in to speak. It felt like I had 4 legs, and the duvet was very tightly on me. I traced my hands along the side of the blanket, trying to find a corner, but it felt like it was going on forever. The bed felt massive, and so did the blanket. My friends thought everything had worn off by then. Lying in bed was the worst thing for me. The open-eye visuals were getting less intense, but the closed-eye ones in the dark were ridiculous. I felt like I could see no difference between my eyes being open or closed. I managed to speak and muttered to my friends that I had to just sleep and wait for it to wear off. I was very irritable because my friends didn't realize how hard I was tripping, asking me things like, "Describe it," or "Should I try it now?" I managed to say no to both after getting out of bed and going into the other room. All I could say was, I was not done tripping. I wanted to explain I liked being in the light and not in bed, as the open-eye visuals were much less intense than the closed-eye visuals. I got into bed again and felt as if I was standing up. I lay there feeling as if my skin was no longer on my body, wanting for this to end feeling broken and tired, but it was impossible to fall asleep. Lying in bed, I thought this was all a dream. This couldn't be possible. I still don't understand how anything like that is possible. I felt like I fell into my own brain and then fell into a dream, and then into an iPad screen in that dream and another thing in that iPad screen and so on. The only way I could get up was if I went back through all of the stages I fell through. After another 20 minutes in bed, I could stand up. I was talking to myself, trying to explain things, getting my vocabulary back, as I felt like on mute. After about an hour after the initial dose, I could talk somewhat normally and was able to figure out where I was. The worst thing for me was that it wasn't just that I didn't know where I was, it was what and who I was. I had no control over my body whatsoever, and this was what I hated most. Looking back at it, it was horrible. I'm glad to have been there and done that, but it was just too intense for my liking. It was a full-on trip, with all 5 of my senses going into overdrive. I felt like I'd rather die than live like this for another hour. The worst thing about it looking back was that I didn't know who I was, what I was, or anything around me. The world didn't exist. I was in multiple dimensions. I didn't understand the concept of space or time and couldn't figure anything out. When I gave up and tried to relax, I was still being bombarded with odd visuals of doing the same thing over again. I way overdosed it as a friend of mine had about 5 mg of salvinorum-a later and said he enjoyed it, and another friend had double that and similarly hated it. After a good night's sleep, I felt completely fine, but have had shortness of breath for 2 days after I woke up. Overall, it was not fun at all.